In pages 45 through 60, Captain Beatty ends up coming to Montag and Mildred's residence to lecture Montag. And he's going to identify 3 key reasons as to why 451 culture has censored books. I want you to evaluate these reasons and consider if there's any relationship to a book you read, a movie you saw, or our society, maybe itself even, or perhaps a foreign culture. Would you like to be described like this? I certainly would not. This tells you a lot about kind of the pains that Mildred takes to try to stay young and beautiful. Of course, that's not what Montag sees. In this section, Mildred now knows that Montag has taken a book. She knows for certain. She feels it behind the pillow during her conversation with Beatty and Montag. He says, "Can you turn the TV down?" And she says, "Sure. You're a sick guy." But she lies, and then she doesn't turn it down, asking if that's better. He admits to participating in the burning of a woman, and she responds, "Well, why'd you throw up? And good thing you threw up on a rug that's washable." She's obsessed with her bunch, right? Her family, her relatives on the screen, and consumer items more so than her husband. YouTubers call their followers family. This might be a modern parallel reminiscent of Mildred's family in 451 culture, with many people supposedly using YouTube to replace real relationships in our own culture. Do you know who Dante is, Jonathan Swift, or Marcus Aurelius? You should know who these great human beings were, and if not, you should search through some of their writings and quotations and interpret, analyze, and evaluate one. As an example, Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, Meditations, which you can buy, and you should, or you can get it for free from the library, which you should. He says, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Ryan Holiday wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way, based on this title. Yeah, look, obstacles are our teachers. School is a laboratory to experience those obstacles and to find ways to hurdle them. Montag has a huge epiphany, too, actually, that there's got to be something special in books to cause a woman to be willing to be burnt alive to protect them. He'll never be able to forget this, and perhaps nor should he ever forget it. And he, for the first time in his life, he realizes that human beings are behind the books he burns. They are responsible for thinking them up, and their blood, sweat, and tears go into them. And when he says man, he means humans, man being short for all of us, since we are all humans, regardless of how you identify. We need to be bothered every now and then, Montag says, about something important, something real, like Mother Teresa was. She was bothered by poverty, and she did something about it. Like Gandhi was. He was bothered by British colonial control of India. He did something about it. Bloodlessly, inspired by Henry David Thoreau, as Dr. King did, inspired by Gandhi, who was inspired by Thoreau. And of course, Rosa Parks, the classic example of somebody who's bothered by something and does something in response to it. If you're bothered by something and you take to social media to complain about it, you're doing nothing. In fact, I would say you're causing the problem to be worse. But if you're bothered by something and you go out there and take action to do something on behalf of that something, now you're in the realm of Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Rosa Parks. Otherwise, keep quiet. Everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending. Out of the college and into the nursery, politics becomes a one-sentence headline. Look, all of these supposedly diverse and free-thinking media outlets who actually just bow to advertiser dollars, and they'll do anything to get a click, and they're not even news at all anymore. Look at how they all got the memo to call President Trump's speech dark. Look at how constantly during the Obama administration he was called a failure. And that what he was doing was wrong and failing over and over. Our understanding of the world is shaped by a hunger for narrative. We need stories because we're uncomfortable with ambiguity, and life is ambiguous and uncertain. And since we're uncomfortable with that uncertainty and that ambiguity, we want a story to explain things. Oh, he's a failure. Oh, he's dark. Okay, that narrative explains it for us, and we latch on to that narrative. We love those stories. But life is inexact. And when we tell stories to explain things, we have to remember those stories are made up and not necessarily representative of actual reality. In fact, in many cases, they are not at all connected to reality. They're just a story that we tell to try to explain things. And since we have a weakness for story, we latch onto those stories and assume they're true when they may not be. Hamlet has been reduced to a single page in this culture. George Orwell got it wrong. Chuck Palahniuk says in Lullaby, Big Brother's busy holding your attention every moment you're awake, making sure you're distracted from what matters, making sure you're absorbed in a bunch of nonsense, memes and so forth, making sure your attention's always filled. Because if you're always fed, that's worse than being watched. Since the world's always filling you, no one has to worry about what's in your mind. Well, with everyone's imagination atrophied, no one will be a threat. This is exactly how censorship works in Fahrenheit 451. Just read the quotation from Captain Beatty at the bottom of 52, which eerily parallels Carl Streeter's lines in Lullaby. And we get some explanation as to why a large population with lots of minorities has to turn towards censorship. He says it didn't even come from the government. It was minority pressure that carried the trick. We're seeing a lot of minority groups pressuring a lot of institutions in our society to stop certain teachings, to start certain other teachings. You can argue about those all you want, but Ricky Gervais sees offense as collateral damage of free speech. He sees it as something that you kind of have to deal with to get the good side of being able to express yourself. Louis C.K. says we have to offend people sometimes. It's actually healthy, because when you get offended, it causes you to want to do something. It forces you to think about something. That's a good thing from those comedians' perspectives. What do you think? Social media, is there a parallel to being filled all of the time? Claire Lehman says that it satiates our appetite for moral disgust and tribal conflict, just like fast food satiates our hunger for fat and sugar. But we should not eat fast food ever, and we should not use social media ever to express moral disgust and to get into bickering fights and so forth. Bonus opportunity, if you're in my class, go a week without social media and write a narrative about your experience, 1 page in length. Can you do it? I know most of you right now know that you cannot, but I know that you can, and you should try it, see what happens. If all the year we're playing holiday, to sport would be as tedious as work, says Shakespeare. And we see this in Fahrenheit 451. If all we did was play, play would become work. Just like if all we do is work, work becomes, makes you go bonkers, right? You need a balance of both of those things. We must all be alike. Not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal, compelled, forced equal. We don't want to look at a mountain of a human being like Michael Phelps or like Malala and think, oh, we could never be like those great swimmers, that brilliant young freedom fighter. I'm going to cower before them. Well-read people make us cower because they know things. And so if I want to keep the peace of mind of people, I have to get rid of people who know lots of stuff. Okay? I don't want anybody to feel inferior, ever. And so I'm going to censor, judge, and execute people that cause others to feel inferior. But feeling inferior and unequal in the face of the greats, that is something we have to deal with. It's the price we have to pay for aim, achievement, and ambition. And in this episode of The Simpsons, Homer feels, like he failed compared to Thomas Edison. And yet Thomas Edison felt like he failed compared to, his hero, who I think it was Da Vinci maybe. But feeling unworthy in front of the greats, that inspires us actually to go out and try to do great things. And to be an average person working at your career to the best of your ability and taking care of your family, that is the most special thing in the world. Not Taylor Swift's voice, not, some politician's power, not some billionaire's wealth. Being an average human being and showing up every day and doing your best to care for your family and to care for this culture and to take care of people and have respect and dignity for them all. That is what we're after. That is something to laud, I think at least. Look, if you want total equality, then you'll have zero liberty. Okay, that's just how it works, right? If you want total freedom, you'll have zero equality. All right? They say freedom for the wolves means death for the sheep, right? But forcing the wolves to behave like sheep, that also is an impossibility. So what do you want? Like I said before, you want a balance. Okay, just like you want a balance between work and play, so you don't get too much of one or the other. You need a balance of liberty and equality. Okay, if we want to totally get rid of inequality, it's impossible, right? We have to restrict freedoms. So we want to be as equitable a society as possible, and yet also allow free expression. Captain Beatty says, what do we want above all? We want people to be happy. Give them fun. That's what we live for, right? No, we do not live for pleasure and titillation and hedonic happiness, as some people think. In fact, that's going to blow up in front of your face. I think of the SpongeBob Squidward episode. I think of the Twilight Zone episode, where the guy thinks that he's, in heaven. He's at a casino and he's winning, and he's got all these beautiful people and this wonderful social scene, and he wins every single time. And you know what? He comes to feel bored, and he realizes later that he's in hell, because always getting what you want, that is hell. Always having fun, that is actually hell. And what we need is a balance, again, of pleasure and titillation, of hard work. We can't have the kind of life that Beatty offers. We're not even evolved to be happy, according to evolutionary science. Pleasure is designed to evaporate so that dissatisfaction will set in, so that we'll then again pursue more pleasure. Natural selection doesn't want us to be happy. It wants us to be productive and efficient in its narrow sense of productivity. The way to make us productive is to make us anticipate pleasure and yet have that pleasure not last very long. So we're always going for more and more and more and more. Robert Wright's diagnosing the problem. Captain Beatty has a solution, it's just the wrong one. Mildred seems to suggest, I don't think Beatty's right either, even in her limited understanding. Imagine if funerals became this, if they didn't even have funerals. Funeral is to celebrate the person who passed on. We grieve for them, and the grieving process is something that brings us together, and we're reminded that we are a part of a community, and that we are not an individual, that no one is an individual, that nobody does anything on their own, that everybody does things in cooperation, conjunction with other human beings who supply the things that you then use to do the things that you love. What do we lose in a culture that conducts funerals the way they do in 451 culture? Well, you forget what matters. You forget the people that matters and what they did. And you lose the inspirational figures that we all need to keep us going. If you ask why to a lot of questions, you end up very unhappy indeed, Beatty says. Notice how Beatty knows immediately who Montag is talking about when he mentions a neighbor. Beatty names her, Montag doesn't. Beatty already knew about Clarice and her family. In fact, Beatty is responsible for her death. I see no other way to piece the evidence together than to assume this. Beatty wants us not to ask questions and to be safe ideologically. But we have to kind of exist in that negative capability where we have to be okay with the uncertainty and the mystery without reaching for absolutes. Negative capability, as Keats called it, that Shakespeare possessed. We need to be after the same thing. Van Jones echoes this, saying he doesn't want us to be safe ideologically or emotionally. He wants us to be strong, which is different. He's not going to pave the jungle for you. You have to put your boots on, lace them up, and deal with adversity. I'm not going to take the weights out of the gym. That's the whole point of the gym, and this is the gym. Beatty has taken the weights out of the gym, and as a result, we get a culture of Mildreds. Einstein said the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It's the source of art and science. He to whom the emotion is a stranger can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, and you're as good as dead with your eyes closed. We need mystery, the great Neil Armstrong says, because it creates wonder, and wonder is the basis for man, and by man, again, it's human's desire to understand. You want to be a realized being? Then simply be a person with an acute sense of the mystery of everything. Again, have that negative capability. Have the ability to exist in the uncertainty and the mystery without reaching for an exact answer. Because when wonder arises, it's new and it's singular. And we cast up stories to try to explain it, and it makes us, swell in our heart. And then we do something as a result. Why would you want to take that away? Well, Beatty and his power-hungry people have decided to do this. Who benefits, though, from this culture? Qui bono is something that you had to ask in the ancient world. When any crime was committed, who benefits was the question that followed the crime, because whoever did the crime probably benefits from it, right? So who's benefiting from 451 culture? It's not Mildred, it's not Montag. It's the Captain Beatties of the world, the people with the power, the people that are still reading, and yet reading's not for everybody else. It seems as if Beatty's still reading. Let's go to war. They say every 10 years we're supposed to go to war with somebody because the corporate media is controlled by people who want to sell arms all over the planet so that we can keep our economy going. Who benefits from going to war? The Vladimir Putins of the world. Okay, the auto industry said that they couldn't afford to put seatbelts on cars. Okay, they lied. okay, because they benefited from not having to do this. Can you imagine that? They did this, okay? Let's use high-stakes tests to gauge student achievement. These powerful testing companies that control the legislators who then control what I have to do in the classroom. I have no power. Can you imagine a legislator telling a doctor how to be a doctor? Or a legislator telling a lawyer how to be a lawyer? It's insane. It would never happen. Of course, teachers don't get the same respect as lawyers and doctors. We don't get the same pay, which is part of the reason we don't get the same respect. But of course, our work is 10 times more valuable than the lawyers of the world, who actually cause the problems that we're sifting through in our own world. We're the happiness boys, Beatty says. We stand against those who want to make everyone unhappy. And he's right to a degree. This great author had a feud with another great thinker, and this gentleman here left as a result of the feud on Twitter. This great thinker Taleb often gets in sort of spats with people online, although Taleb just kind of unveils the morons out there, it seems like, for the most part. But it is nonfiction, professors calling each other names, unfortunately. And you do come away lost when you have great thinkers getting into feuds instead of trying to find common ground and a compromise, which is what we all have to do to survive. We have to compromise as a nation, as a culture, as a world. For the first time in his life, Montag realizes that human effort and feelings and experience go into the making of literature, of art, and he resolves, despite this warning visit from Beatty, and it is a warning visit, Beatty sends the hound to sniff around. It doesn't work. Beatty comes to warn Montag that he's going off trail, and we know it doesn't work because Montag admits at the end of this section that he'll never be a firefighter again. He's going to instead experiment with his wife, Mildred, so that they can understand why their lives are such a mess. And indeed, all of life is an experiment, and the more experiments you make, the better. Dalton Trumbo, pictured at right, this screenwriter, did his best work in the tub. Is it unusual? Is it strange? Maybe to you. It wasn't to Trumbo. It worked for him. Good for him. Okay? He's experimenting. He found his path. He was successful as a result. You've got to be experimenting as a youth to find where you best fit in. And if you have to, look like Dalton Trumbo, so be it. It's better than being a Captain Beatty. All right. Check this out. See if you agree. Answer the questions if you'd like. We'll continue on to the next section. Moving forward. Last comments on this section, because it's a really dense, important section. Beatty sees contemplation as somehow somber. Mildred knows that the guy has a book in the house. More sports to keep people, busy. We're the custodians of the peace of mind. Cram them full of useless knowledge, like, I hate to say this, but some classes that you're required to take in high school. Algebra. I have no idea how algebra has any basis for any normal human. Of course, it's useful for mathematicians and rocket scientists, but algebra, it made no sense to me. I got D's in it in high school. I've never used it since. If you have, good for you. I'm glad you have, but I certainly haven't found any use for it. So bring on the things that distract you from what really matters. And that's what this 451 media wants. And that's what Beatty's after.